El Centro Olof Palme México te invita a conocer su más reciente publicación, Desarme y Seguridad Internacional, la Agenda Olvidada, escrito por la doctora María Cristina Rosas y prologado por Peter Wallenstein. En este volumen podrás leer sobre temas como el concepto de desarme, los costos del desarme, el desarme y la seguridad internacional, las armas de destrucción en masa, biológicas, químicas, nucleares, los grandes sistemas de armas convencionales, las armas de fuego, las minas terrestres antipersona, las municiones en racimo, la inteligencia artificial y las armas letales autónomas, los organismos internacionales y el desarme, los organismos no gubernamentales, la diplomacia ciudadana, las celebridades y el desarme. Para diplomacia y desarme. Desarme, desmovilización, reinserción, reintegración. México y el desarme. Para adquirir este y otros títulos del Centro Olof Palme México, envíanos un mensaje a través de nuestras redes sociales. Anímate a conseguir tu propio ejemplar y contáctanos hoy mismo.
Good morning, Mexico. Good morning, Canada. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you to this interview that we are having with one of the most prominent experts on Canadian foreign policy. I know that he's considered the guru of Canadian foreign policy studies, and I really appreciate that Kim Richard Nossal is sharing some of his busy agenda with us today. Welcome, Kim. It's a great pleasure to have you this morning.
Thank you so much, María Cristina. It's wonderful to be back with you.
Thank you, Kim. That's true. We've been discussing especially Canadian, American, Mexican, American, and Mexican-Canadian relations in different times. And well, we are living, challenging times. That's a courtesy of Donald Trump. And his decisions are having huge impacts in the world and, of course, in Canada and Mexico. And this is the purpose of this interview. Kim Richard Nossal has an extensive bibliography on Canadian issues, Canadian politics, Canadian-U.S. relations, and related matters. And I would like to introduce some of the aspects of the curriculum of our guests. Kim Richard Nossal went to school in Melbourne, Beijing, Toronto, and Hong Kong, and attended the University of Toronto, receiving his PhD in 1977. In 1976, he joined the Department of Political Science at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario. I believe that's when we met, because at that time I was visiting Canada, by the end of the 80s, and I met you on the suggestion of several experts on Canadian issues that told me, if you are dealing with Canadian foreign policy, you really must talk to Kim Nossal. So I did. So did I. And yes, here we are. Well, Kim Nossal taught there at McMaster University. He taught international relations and Canadian foreign policy, serving as chair of the department from 89 to 90 and 1992 to 1996. In 2001, he went to Queen's University, heading the Department of Political Studies until 2009. He served as director of the Center for International and Defense Policy from 2011 to 2013. From 2013 to 2015, he was the executive director of the Queen's School of Policy Studies. He has served as editor of International Journal, the Quarterly Journal of the Canadian International Council, Canada's Institute of International Affairs, and was president of the Canadian Political Science Association. He served as chair of the Academic Selection Committee of the Security and Defense Forum of the Department of National Defense from 2006 to 2012. In 2017, he was awarded an honorary doctorate by the Royal Military College of Canada. Professor Emeritus Nossal retired from Queen's Department of Political Studies in 2020, but don't believe that because he's retired, he's not writing, he's not discussing, he's not making reflections about today's world. He has been very active. And I would like to mention a few works that he has published. His most recent book, I have it with me, is Canada Alone, Navigating the Post-American World. I strongly recommend those of you interested in Canadian foreign policy to read it immediately. But he also has written a book about Canadian foreign policy that happens to be the most important reference on Canadian foreign policy studies. And he has also written a book on Canada's role in Afghanistan, and also a book called Charlie Foxtrot, Fixing Defense Procurement in Canada. He has also done a lot of work, comparative studies between Canada and Australia. He has written on sanctions. He has written on other foreign policy where the two countries happen to be similar, but also different. And there is this book that he wrote together with Andrew Cooper about relocating middle powers, Australia and Canada, in a changing world order. So, frankly, to better understand Canada, which is a fascinating country to study, well, you should take a look at what Kim Richard Nossal has written and done. And I would like to use the time we have for this interview and to start with a question about the challenges that Canada is facing. I will use some of the issues that you address in your most recent book, because you suggest that Canada historically has interacted with the world through the US, or more or less. So now that the US is retracting from the world, now that Donald Trump is smashing multilateral institutions, is withdrawing from many of them, how is this impacting Canada? I believe that's the sense of the title of this book, Canada Alone. So how do you see Canada in this post-American world?
Thank you very much, María Cristina, for that first of all, for that very kind introduction. Your question goes to the very heart of the issue that is facing all of us in the international system, Canadians, Mexicans, everyone. And I think for the neighbors of the United States, Mexico and Canada, the challenges are the hardest, mainly because the Trump administration coming back to office is very different from the Trump administration that we knew from 2017 to 2021. The major difference, first of all, is that Donald Trump is now able and willing to act out on his very old-fashioned and very wrong ideas about how the international economy works. And I think that all of us outside the United States need to understand that what we have here is a deep vein of non-rationality or even irrationality. The actions of someone who literally does not understand international economics, someone who is fundamentally illiterate when it comes to the economy, someone who believes that tariffs will be paid for by other countries, and that other countries will pay for those tariffs into the treasury of the United States. It is quite mad. It is quite it is the actions of a lunatic, and the difficulty is that Mr. Trump and those around him are simply either unwilling or unable to recognize the fundamental errors of looking at the world in this way. And so that, it seems to me, is a fundamental difference between the first Trump administration and the second Trump administration. And as a consequence, we see unfolding before us the destruction of huge amount of wealth, but also the destruction of the international trading system. And that poses huge challenges, and we can talk about how to deal with those challenges. The second major difference between the first Trump administration and the second Trump administration is that we have seen, since the election in November, we have seen the emergence of a very different kind of American foreign policy, a foreign policy that we in Canada haven't seen for more than 150 years, a foreign policy that in Mexico is much more familiar to you in a more recent past. But this is a foreign policy that is overtly imperialist and expansionist, and basically upsets the entire structure of international relations. We need to recognize, first of all, that in his inaugural address, Donald J. Trump underscored the predatory nature, the expansionist nature of his foreign policy. He promised, and there it was, right out there in the open, he promised that the United States would once again become a growing nation, a nation that expanded its territories, a nation that would fly its flag, as he put it, to new and beautiful horizons. And this is something that we literally had not heard of during the campaign. We had seen a little bit of it with regard to Greenland and wanting to buy Greenland in the first term. But all of a sudden, after the inauguration, and even actually before the inauguration, Mr. Trump announced that he would take back the Panama Canal from the Republic of Panama, that he would take Greenland from the Kingdom of Denmark, and that he would use what he called economic force to annex Canada to the United States. This is a level of American imperialism that we really haven't seen since the last years of the 19th century, when President McKinley did indeed expand the United States. It seized the Philippines. It seized Puerto Rico. It annexed Hawaii. President McKinley oversaw an expansion of the United States, and I think that Donald Trump is seeing that as a possibility. That is a huge and major difference because it has such implications for all, certainly both of the neighbors, all of the neighbors of the United States, Greenland, Canada, and Mexico, because although Mr. Trump has not laid any claim to Mexican territory, there's no doubt that if we have an imperialist in office as President of the United States, then there's no doubt that he will act like an imperialist towards anyone that he believes is going to get in his way. And that includes then Mexico for a whole variety of reasons.
Yes, it's terrible. And in Mexico, we are very worried about the fact that, for example, under Trump, American vessels have been very close to our waters, to Mexican waters. And there's this threat about using military force against Mexican drug lords and, all this rhetoric that I agree is very imperialistic. And at the same time, Trump is refusing to abide by multilateral rules. So it's a very critical moment for the world. Would you say that Donald Trump has resigned to the use of soft power? I know that the concept of soft power is controversial, but I believe that previous presidents in the U.S. used a lot of the soft power of the U.S. for the promotion of America's interests in the world. But I see in Donald Trump hard power. Economic hard power, military hard power. I don't see soft power. How do you see it, Kim?
I think you're exactly correct to say that Trump doesn't use soft power. That is because I think he doesn't understand soft power, and he doesn't recognize exactly how important soft power was to American hegemony during the Cold War and post-Cold War eras. I don't think that he has the slightest idea of how it was that the United States managed to secure such a dominant position in the international system. And it's quite clear that Mr. Trump has not only any understanding of that, but he certainly has no desire to try and continue what his predecessors and his one successor, Mr. Biden, managed to do with soft power. So he literally throws it away. And we've seen that most clearly in the case of the United States Agency for International Development, USAID. The destruction of USAID means that, for example, the United States no longer is out there in the world being seen as an active member of the international community responding to global events. So, and we've seen it most clearly in the case of the massive earthquake in Myanmar, where normally under a normal president, under a president who understood American power, that earthquake would have immediately started a bureaucratic reaction in Washington, the mobilization of hundreds of Americans to go out into the field and bring American aid. And that aid normally would have been huge in the millions of dollars, and it would have been effective and it would have been delivered fast. What do we see here? We see precisely 3 American officials flying into Myanmar to begin to do some planning. And what do we discover? Those 3 officials were fired from their jobs while they were in Myanmar. They received emails announcing that their employment with USAID had terminated. In the meantime, what we see is other countries who do understand what soft power is and the importance of soft power to projecting their global interests. We see those countries front and center, most notably the People's Republic of China, which sent huge teams to assist. Likewise, India and a number of other countries. But primarily, the absence of the United States tells us an awful lot about the end of American soft power.
I agree with you, and I believe another indication that Donald Trump doesn't understand soft power is that the Voice of America has been shut down also.
Yes.
And the Voice of America served American interests for a long time, and it was an expression of soft power. So now I would like to know your views about how sustainable is a Donald Trump administration under these circumstances. And I'm thinking about something he said a few days ago about running for a 3rd term. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm also worried about Vance, the vice president, because he seems to be, in the process of preparation for taking over at some point on the side of the Republicans. So how do you see this ultra-conservative, neoconservatism, or, political relevance that Donald Trump and his ideas and his followers is having in the political spectrum of the U.S. thinking about the future?
I think it's a good question. First of all, let me object, please, to the use of the word conservative to describe Mr. Trump or MAGA or the Trump administration. This is not a conservative administration, an administration that seeks to conserve what is good and best. This is a radical administration. It gives off the vibe, the very strong vibe of the Cultural Revolution in China in the late 1960s, where you have a political leader and a mass movement, very much a cult of personality that seeks largely to do nothing more than destroy. And if you think about the Cultural Revolution and the efforts of those not only who guided the Cultural Revolution, but those who were involved in it, to essentially take the institutions that had developed in the People's Republic of China in the 20 years since liberation, and to think about the way in which they were eager to destroy those institutions. What we're seeing in the United States is something very similar to that, where you have a leader that has no particular understanding of the way in which the world works, but is keen on implementing his own particular views that were developed during his youth and have never changed despite the huge changes that have occurred. And he doesn't have a mob of Red Guards, but he does have Elon Musk and his 20-something apparatchiks engaged in the active destruction of the United States government. And as one comic put it, it seems to be that Elon Musk and his minions are attacking those bits of the administration of the US government, the notion that if it thinks, it should be destroyed. And so what we've seen is an attack on not only the so-called deep state, the destruction of a variety of institutions, some of which we've already mentioned, Voice of America, USAID, but also other institutions. I mean, the institution that you and I are most familiar with, Maria Cristina, the Wilson Center, has just simply been shut down. Yes. And it no longer performs the many acts of contribution that it did over the years. And so what we see is essentially a destructive vibe, not a great deal of construction. And it would very much appear that that is something that is actually going to undermine, in my humble estimation, the administration. Because there's no doubt that it's easy to destroy institutions. Yes. It is exceedingly difficult to put those institutions back together, or even to put a new set of institutions in place. And yet the United States, with its 340 million people, an amazingly complex political community and an amazingly complex and vibrant economy, that political community is not going to be able to work for long under the conditions that Mr. Trump has set in his first months in office. And so I must admit, I would not be at all surprised if what we see is a reaction on the part of Americans who are going to be highly negatively affected by all of this destruction, the destruction of the global trading arrangement, the destruction of American institutions, the destruction of bits and pieces of American culture. And so what we're likely to see is an intensification, it seems to me, of the kind of protests that we saw this last weekend. Yes. And I don't think that Mr. Trump is going to make it to a third term. First of all, let's face it, time is not on his side. Right. Number one, he is an old man. He is showing lots of signs of mental difficulties. Yes. And moreover, he's got the U.S. Constitution to deal with, and two parts of that Constitution make it quite clear that there are huge obstacles in the way. But more importantly, it's not at all clear that there isn't going to be, at some particular point, a huge reaction amongst those very Americans who are right now sustaining him in power. And I'm thinking of the Republican members of Senate, the Republican members of the House of Representatives. Those individuals, as we know, have not been doing their job. They didn't do their job in his first term, and they absolutely are not doing their job now. But at a certain point, is it possible that Mr. Trump, as he continues his assault on American institutions, simply may accumulate so many objections on that those Republican members of Congress have, that they will move against him. I mean, there are huge numbers of Republicans, elected Republicans, who in private will admit that all of this is terrible,
Yes.
but who in public will, of course, support the president, mainly because they are scared. They are scared of being ousted from power, like Liz Cheney was.
Yes.
They are scared of the president's own supporters. I mean, what's amazing to me is that MAGA world in the United States is filled with folks who have no difficulty at all in issuing death threats against members of their own party in Congress. And it's quite clear that members of Congress on the Republican side are scared of those death threats that are coming from the MAGA movement. And so I must admit, to me, it would not be at all surprising if it's 2027 and we're in the middle of an impeachment against Donald Trump, because that's what happens when you have this kind of assault on institutions. There will be a reaction. Don't know what form the reaction will take. Don't know when it will occur, but it's likely, not 100%, but it's likely to occur.
Yes, it looks to me much worse that that assault on January 2021 against Capitol Hill, right? This is much worse, but we have that as a reference of what could happen under a second Donald Trump administration. This is terrible, Kim. But again, I believe we should be trying to hope for the best, although we cannot do much about it at this point. There's been a lot of talk since the end of the 80s about the decline of the U.S. as a major superpower. We remember Paul Kennedy, and we remember a number of authors that have endorsed this analysis. Do you see the U.S. declining faster under Donald Trump? I believe that during his first administration, we saw some signs of rapid declining, and the damage control policies of Biden didn't work very well. So, and now we have a second administration demolishing everything by Donald Trump. Do you see that the U.S. is definitely declining as a superpower? And do you see somebody getting, the leadership in the world after a post-American world?
I think that the debate about American decline in the past was a very different kind, or saw decline in a very different kind of way. I mean, when Paul Kennedy was talking about decline, he was talking about it in generational terms, from the perspective of hundreds of years.
Yeah.
I think that the United States under Donald Trump is not going to be a declining power in that way. In other words, where it will simply fragment and fall apart. The United States remains an incredibly powerful state. It has a huge amount of hard power, as we all know. It has far more hard power than any other group of countries, even combined. And we can see the predominance of the United States, and that is not going to go away. The United States retains its leadership role in the sense of it leads in global developments in military hardware, in military capability. Where the United States is going to change is that it's no longer going to be seen as a global leader. And in that sense, it seems to me that the decline that we might talk about is a decline in standing. First of all, we've already seen in simply a couple of months the speed with which the United States has destroyed the trust of virtually everyone in the international system, certainly amongst all of its friends and allies. If you think about the Europeans, for example, and how they now understand that there's a huge degree of animus in Washington, in the administration, towards Europe, towards the European project, towards individual European countries. There is an understanding on the part of both neighbors of the United States in North America, Mexico and Canada, that the United States simply cannot be trusted. I mean, here the government of the United States decided to abandon its own agreements, its own agreement with Canada and Mexico. USMCA, CUSMA, as it's known in Canada, TMEC in Mexico. The president had no difficulty at all in just trashing that agreement. And so that without that trust that the United States can be counted on to stand by its agreements, why would we bother to renegotiate something that when Mr. Trump feels like it, he just trashes? And the Europeans, the Mexicans, the Canadians understand this. In the Indo-Pacific, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand, the smaller countries of ASEAN, all of them have had their trust destroyed by the United States. In particular, this last week, with the imposition of tariffs, it's quite clear that the United States really doesn't have any friends. Yes, Benjamin Netanyahu may go to Washington and he and Mr. Trump may exchange words about friendship. But the fact is that even when Israel can be economically attacked by the United States, its supposed friend, when Israel has the Israelis aren't cheating in their economic relationship with the United States, and yet with that 17% tariff, that's going to hurt the Israeli economy hugely. And so it seems to me that what we're talking about here is a decline in the standing of the United States, that no longer will others in the international system regard the U.S. as a friend, and will be very hesitant to work with it. As our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has said, the old relationship that Canada had with the United States, where we saw the importance of close economic integration, of close security cooperation, that relationship, he said, is over. I imagine that Mexicans have exactly the same view, even though your president has a slightly different approach to the United States. But Europeans certainly, and America's friends on the other side of the Pacific, are all seeing the decline of that standing.
Yes, I believe that in the case of Mexico, our president and her team do not know really how to manage the relations with the Americans under Trump. They are very much afraid too. So we are having a hard time because it's only threats, and then our president says, yes, we are going to do as you said. And this can go on and on and on. But there's this feeling that Mexico is very weak and very bad equipped to deal with the Trump administration. You mentioned Mark Carney, and you're having federal elections by the end of this month. And
Yep.
I was looking at the polls, and when Trudeau was the prime minister, the polls were very bad for the Liberals. But it seems that the arrival of Mark Carney is helping a lot the Liberals. What's your take on the scenarios that Canada may be facing by the end of this month? Will the Liberals retain power, or what will happen with the Conservatives?
It's a very fascinating phenomenon. The Conservatives under Pierre Poilievre were so far ahead of the Liberals throughout 2024, that at least 20 points ahead. There was no question in the minds of most Canadians looking at the polls and looking at how their fellow citizens were thinking about the Liberal government. There was no question that we were going to get a change of government and that the Conservatives were going to win. Mm-hmm. When Mr. Trump was elected and immediately threatened to impose tariffs of 25% on Canada and Mexico after he was elected. As you know, there was a bit of a difference in how Mexico and Canada responded. Yes. The Canadians immediately raced down to Mar-a-Lago to see if they couldn't negotiate with Trump. Now, as you probably know, Mr. Trump has a deep, deep dislike of Justin Trudeau.
Yes.
And always let that be on show. And when Mr. Trudeau went to Mar-a-Lago and said to Trump over dinner, look, if you impose these tariffs, it's going to kill the Canadian economy. Trump responded, apparently as a joke, to say, well, if you can't survive that kind of tariff, then maybe what you should do is think about joining the United States, and then there won't be any tariffs because we don't impose tariffs against one of our own states. That joke was a joke on the 30th of November, but by the 2nd and 3rd of December, it had ceased to be a joke, and it had started to capture the minds of this befuddled old man. And all of a sudden, he decides that if you link the annexation of Canada and a threat against Greenland that he had already now started to put out, that what you would get is a greater America, an America that included Canada and Greenland, would be a country of 22 million square kilometers. It would be vaster than China. It would be 5 million square kilometers larger than the Russian Federation. And this idea seems to have captured Trump's imagination. We know that he was shown a map of the North, including Greenland and Canada's Arctic regions, and he was shown it on a Mercator map. You know how Mercator, it projects the poles, the North and South, in hugely magnified ways. We know he was shown a Mercator map, and it's entirely possible that he just simply thought about the vast size of what it would be if the United States could get control of Greenland and Canada. And so that the moment that happened, however, we had a huge transformation in Canadian politics. In particular, what immediately happened was that there was a nationalist response in Canada and a rallying around the government. And Mr. Trudeau decided that he would in fact retire, which he announced in the new year. And almost immediately, what happened was that Canadians began to recognize that with Trudeau no longer there, virtually anyone would be better than Pierre Poilievre in the Conservatives. And Pierre Poilievre can come across sounding very Trumpy. He, for example, he likes nicknames for his opponents. He has quite clearly made sort of bedfellows with some right-wing folks in Canada. The person running his campaign has been happily photographed wearing a Make America Great Again hat. And so that what we've seen is a radical shift in political fortunes in Canada. And almost immediately, we saw the Liberals begin to catch up to the Conservatives and then move ahead. And so on the 28th of April, it's not clear what will happen. Some polls show that the Liberal Party under Mark Carney is going to get a majority in the House of Commons. Other polls are slightly less optimistic, and so I still would not put very much money on the Liberals, but I would put money on the Liberals. The Conservatives, in particular, since Mr. Poilievre, although he has come out as with some anti-Trump remarks, he still, for example, uses the slogan "Canada First." And you know, you would think that in a country where America First and the America First leader are now widely hated, that you would want to abandon such a slogan. But Mr. Poilievre, in his wisdom, has not, and that may end up hurting him on election day.
I can imagine. Kim, there's a couple of questions on Canada and Mexico relations, but before that, I would like to hear from you. How good or well equipped is Mark Carney to deal from Canada with Donald Trump in economic terms? By that, I mean that I know that the current Prime Minister has experience as head of the Bank of England, the Bank of Canada. He's a businessman, so probably he's better equipped to deal with Donald Trump, but I would like to hear your views on that.
The problem with dealing with Donald Trump is that you really can't deal with Donald Trump. To deal with someone, you have to have a shared understanding of objective reality. You have to be dealing with someone who is rational. You have to deal with someone. You have to have someone who understands how the world works. And unfortunately, this is just simply something that is beyond Mr. Trump. It would be sort of like saying, well, now how do I deal with someone who believes that the earth is flat and that therefore we shouldn't be traveling because we're going to fall off the end of the earth? Well, bluntly put, there's no way to deal with such a person. And so that Mr. Carney is likely to have to do what all other leaders in the international system are doing, and that is to try and manage the relationship with Mr. Trump. What, excuse me, what I would suggest is that person-to-person relations, summit relations, are to be kept off the table. You do not want to, in my view, you do not want to go down and become part of sort of the Oval Show, where you get stuck in what a colleague at the University of British Columbia, Kevin Milligan, has called the humiliation chair, the same chair that Vladimir Zelensky got sat in, where you have the president in the other chair and members of his administration, and it's all a big show. You do not want to do that. What you want to do is negotiate, perhaps, with his administration, but not with him, because there's no dealing with him at all.
Yeah, he doesn't have respect for anyone, so it's difficult. Yes, there is a couple of questions by the audience about Mexico and Canada, and one of the questions is about the way Mexico is seen by Canadians, because this person who is asking says that it seems Mexico and Canada have distanced themselves a lot in recent years due to the visas issues and other issues. So what's your take on that, Kim?
I was very disappointed when Mark Carney decided to make his first trips abroad to Europe, but then when he returned from Europe to not visit President Sheinbaum in Mexico. If I had been advising him, it would have been, yes, go to Britain, go to France. Those were very smart moves.
Yes.
But then fly to Mexico City. Firm up that relationship. Don't simply do it by phone. Firm up that relationship, because the only way that the neighbors of the United States are going to deal with the United States is together. Excuse me. And there's no doubt that we have had over the last number of years a distancing that we really should be reversing right now. Yes, we have some differences of interest in how we deal with the United States, differences of approach, but we should be like this with each other in our relationship with the administration in Washington.
I agree. We have, the USMCA review process in the months to come, and probably it would be wise to be closer, Mexico and Canada, during this process. And I remember when the G20 meeting in Brazil took place some weeks ago, President Sheinbaum met with Trudeau. They got together and they spoke about bilateral relations. And she spoke to other leaders. I remember she met with Xi Jinping of China and other leaders. So I think that was smart of her, to show that despite the fact that Donald Trump was coming back, that Mexico was trying to maintain a dialogue with other countries. The fact that Mexico depends so much on the U.S. doesn't help. But again, I believe that we should keep our options, at least our political options, open with dialogues with other countries. So I believe Canada is extremely important, but I regret the fact that we have distance for a number of reasons in recent years. And the other question from the audience is from Carlos from the North American Center at UNAM, the Study Center of North America at UNAM, about the destiny of the North American summits. He says that during the first Donald Trump administration, there were no North American summits, and it seems there won't be any. under his second administration. And he asks if this appreciation is correct.
Oh, absolutely. And in my view, Carlos, it's a good thing that there are no summits. Mr. Trump is not someone who believes in summits, except when he is the dominant player, and that means a one-on-one summit. And the idea of the so-called three amigos getting back together as during the Bush administration, for example, I think it would be disastrous. It would be disastrous for both Canada and Mexico. It would be disastrous because in both countries, the idea of their leaders smiling with and being photographed with Trump would not actually go down well politically. That's number one. Number two, the substance of such a summit suggests that the American president is willing to actually treat his two neighbors as equals. And here is something that I think we need to always understand about the Trump administration and Mr. Trump himself personally. And that is that Mr. Trump regards little countries as fundamentally the way that Vladimir Putin regards little countries. And that is as colonies to be booted around and dominated, and if needs be, crushed underfoot, because they have to accept what they must accept. And the idea that we're back in a period where the American president regards their neighbors, Canada and Mexico, as essentially partners in something North American, that's gone. Mr. Trump will simply use the predatory power of the United States. And if it means, for example, and we in Canada have been extremely nervous by the conspiracy theory that the Trump administration, Mr. Trump, J.D. Vance, and other members such as Peter Navarro and Kevin Hassett have all put out there about Canada's role in the fentanyl trade into the United States. Even though very little fentanyl comes in from Canada, the United States administration has been telling Americans that Canada is a major complicit player in this. Kevin Hassett, for example, has openly said that there are fentanyl labs in Canada. He knows this, and he also knows that Canadian law enforcement have been ignoring these labs. Well, when you get this kind of open lying, you know that there's a broader purpose in mind, and that purpose is essentially to convince Americans, ordinary Americans, many of whom have been touched personally, or their families have been touched by the opioid crisis. And so that we can imagine, I can certainly imagine where the administration in Washington will begin to turn fentanyl into something that will be used against both Canada and Mexico. And certainly my fear is that this is an administration that has consistently said that military action is not off the table when it comes to the neighbors. It's not off the table with regard to the Panama Canal. It's not off the table with regard to Greenland. And it is off the table with regard to Canada, apparently. The United States, the president has said, the United States doesn't need to use military force. Economic force is enough. But I mean, I think that this is the future that we've got to be extremely concerned about, and we need we need to become closer with one another to ensure that if the worst happens, we are there for one another.
Well, Kim, we are coming to an end, but I would like to ask you something to finish the interview. Would you agree that because we are focusing so much on Trump, and for reason, of course, I mean the world, we're focusing very much on what Trump says, what Trump does, we are leaving behind the important issues in the world? Not that the US is not important, not that the tariffs are not important, but what about climate change? What about pandemics? What about development? What about international security? Are we leaving behind those issues due to the attention we are paying to Donald Trump?
Absolutely, but it's not just simply to Trump himself, but to the American administration. The United States administration, when it withdraws from multilateral institutions, when it withdraws from global governance, forces us to ignore all of those things that global governance is essentially designed to do. However, here is where I end on a hopeful note. And that is that I'm hoping that one of the consequences of Mr. Trump's assault on the world is that the rest of the world basically begins to organize itself around the United States in trade and in those other matters that are of global concern. Certainly, climate change is something that the United States is, of course, important, but the really important countries in climate change are China and India. And the more that the rest of the world can organize itself, even and leave the Americans behind, that is something I think that we'll eventually get round to. We have to be focused right now because of the huge impact on the economics that the tariffs are focusing. But it seems to me that we can find a way to deal with issues regardless of where the United States is.
Interesting. I was reading the other day that, for instance, Japan, South Korea, and China are discussing cooperation. That's interesting. They were rivals, they didn't talk to each other, and now they're talking to each other.
Absolutely. And I mean, the People's Republic of China, it hasn't changed its desire to become the dominant state in the Indo-Pacific. And it knows that if the United States continues to behave like this, it's going to be because all of the former friends and allies of the United States, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand, will be forced to deal with a dominant China. And for most of them, they will have to make their peace with China, and that includes Taiwan. And you know, Taiwan is, of course, in a different position, given the fact that that it is regarded by China as part of Chinese sovereign territory. But nonetheless, all of those countries of the West, friends and allies of the United States yesterday, no longer so today, they're going to have to deal with a dominant China.
Sure. And China is not in a hurry. That attracts my attention. They're patient, they're waiting, they're looking at the way things are developing, but they're very patient. And that's interesting.
And Xi Jinping and everyone around him in China looks out at the United States, and bluntly put, they cannot believe their extraordinary good fortune that the United States, that Americans have elected a president who does everything that one could hope for if one wanted to see the decline of the United States as the dominant power and the rise of China. They're
Absolutely.
smiling.
They're smiling. The good fortune for China. Okay, Kim, thank you very much. Unfortunately, time is up, but it's been extraordinary talking to you and know your views on these issues. There are other issues we didn't have time to discuss, such as the Ukraine war and the Middle East, but I hope this is an invitation for another interview in the months to come, if possible. And I also want to thank our audience and the people who join us here in Zoom and via Facebook. Thank you, Kim. Do you have a final message, a goodbye message for our audience?
Just to thank you so much, Maria Cristina, for having invited me, and to the audience for the questions. Very much appreciated. Take good care. Thank you again.
Thank you. Take care and see you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.